Hello there, welcome to this video. You know who I am, ED Templar Supreme Misfit, Professional Dipshit. So you want to learn about the weapons in the Deathstalker universe, do you? So, of course, within the future, firearms or projectile weapons like pistols, um, shotguns, and your run-of-the-mill assault rifles are technically illegal. And they're only used by rebels, pirates, and other people of that ilk. And what has replaced it is a disruptor. It's essentially a high-powered energy weapon that takes 2 minutes, and later in the series they shorten that down to 30 seconds. So it takes 2 minutes to fire after every shot, but what you have is a higher energy weapon that punches through steel. It's pretty much anti-material, and it can even go through, various amounts of cover like no problem. It just goes right through. Of course, it removes limbs. It can also set people on fire. And of course, this disruptor is scaled up to ship size to put on ships for space combat. And there's some that are even scaled down to a turret or heavy weapon level to where they can set it up with a battery and it can fire a high focused energy beam, or it can be scaled to however you want it. Maybe you want to cover an entire hallway in higher energy laser. You can do that. So it's scaled down to various. It's like a nozzle, right? Fucking swords. Fucking swords. So if there are two factions fighting each other, they start with their disruptor weapons firing first, and then within that 2 minutes, then both sides close, and essentially combat hasn't changed for millennia. So now you're wondering about the government of the empire in the books. Well, it's essentially a constitutional monarchy. In the same sense, we have a constitutional democratic republic. So if there's anything that is a funny parallel in the books and what we're currently experiencing here as Americans, or just in general, right, is that governance is a lie. You can paint it up to be a republic, democratic republic, but all that remains is influenced by noble or not so noble families, rich houses, influential people. And for example, Donald Trump is tied to his mother was actually a descendant from the Clan MacLeod in Scotland. I bet you didn't know that, but that's a pretty interesting factoid. So to get back to the Deathstalker universe, there's various houses. There's major houses, minor houses, or clans. So there's Clan Campbell and Clan Wolf, and they solve disputes, duels with either sword or disruptor. So that's just generally the weapons. Now there's other weapons. There's Esper abilities as well. And of course the swords, some of them have like a fiber and filament that can cut through just about anything. So it's kind of on the shorter end of the video. But that's it. And of course, the only people who can have the disruptors and the energy weapons, of course, the noble class and the elite. Oh, you can't have us peasants. You can't be trusted because you're not us. So that's essentially it. And of course, if you want to defend yourself, swords aren't exactly illegal. But the proper stuff, like the disruptors, only the ruling class and those who are allowed to have those. And of course, I forgot, in the Deathstalker universe, there is force screens, or kind of force shields. Some of them are powered by batteries or personal devices, and that's kind of the counter to the disruptors. The disruptors, the high energy bolts or what have you, kind of bounce off and ricochet off shit. So, and that is eventually what led to the projectile weapons kind of being uh, kind of produced or pushed out within the Deathstalker universe because bullets can't go through force screens. And of course, they would just hold those up and definitely tell you ran out of ammo. But the funny thing is, projectile weapons are still a thing in the Deathstalker universe. They just have to use them creatively. And in fact, due to the kind of ancient nature of them, the projectile weapons actually kind of worked out in favor of the rebels in the Mistworld when the Empire invaded. So it's antiquated technology, but guns are kind of still a primitive thing, but they still exist in the book, just not on scale. And that's really it as far as just general weapons. We could do more weapons like the Dark Void device and other things. But that's essentially the weapons in the Deathstalker series. It does add to cool swashbuckling kind of stuff, you know, like the old black and white movies where you have the bad guy and the villain having a, you know, duel. And of course, I forgot inspectors in the Deathstalker universe are kind of, some are cybernetic, some of them are not. Just they're people who you get to deal with and kill aliens, but they're also used in a role against rebels to an extent. And some of them work for the clans like Campbell and Wolf, and others have these inspectors working for them, hired as like mercenaries after they retire. So that's the weapons. It's not too complex. It's kind of simple, which I like. It doesn't get too complicated in context to the story of the Deathstalker. So this will also be kind of a review for the book series. The Deathstalker series is pretty cool. It's kind of like a more cynical, realistic, if I can even say that, Star Wars. It's better. I like it better than Star Wars because it's more grim darky, and the Empire compared to the Empire in Star Wars is just more terrifying on the extents they go to maintain control and power. And personal political opinion here, regardless of who you are, to repeat the same message, nothing's changed since the medieval era. We may call ourselves a democratic republic, but you and I both know that that's a fucking lie. And that any form of any real power, like everything else, comes from force of arms, money, and influence. That's it. We, the Americans, and everywhere else, I don't know where you're at watching this video in your own country, you know, yeah, sure, we can vote, but we all know deep down in our bones that a democratic republican democracy is no different than a totalitarian government. Here in America, you know, it's like with Ruby Ridge or Waco, right? We've seen the heavy hand of a democratic republic, and other places in the world. I'm pretty sure your governments, you've witnessed them do some highly oppressive and repressive shit in the name of everyone else, in the name of democracy and freedom. But to me, that's all just a misnomer. What it really is, the true reality is, goes back to those three things: influence, force, and money is how things gets ruled. And there's still barons, there's still kings, there's still royal families, and there's still clans. And that's one thing I appreciate about the Deathstalker books as well, because it says that the Empire is a, you know, constitutional monarchy. And that's essentially what everything is when you really boil it down to its base ingredients. And that's just my view on democracies, republics, democratic republics. You may actually believe the bullshit and drink the bong water, and that's okay. That's your freedom to do so. But for me anymore, I don't. With all this Epstein shit, maybe you share the same opinion that there's people on that list that's never going to see jail time. And I to this day still don't think anyone's going to be arrested that's connected to the Epstein's. And if they are, I'd be thoroughly surprised. But I think it's going to be covered up, and the powers that be are going to come up with some big distraction to make people forget about it, and they're going to hope people forget about it. So if you're like me, never let this Epstein thing go, or the trafficking and victimization of the children and minors by these rich, powerful elites. The only way it stays alive is if you keep talking about it and you keep bringing it up. You keep taking it to power. And to reference this with the Death Stalker series, is that the rebels are kind of in the same situation in the books, where they have this totalitarian regime, and there's still like civil rights issues with clones and espers. And we don't really have that today as much. But it's the single fact remains, whether in the fiction and the real world here, is that we really have no power. The only power we have is through our currency, money, and our firearms. And regardless of your political aisle, you should be saving up money, silver, and gold. It's probably too late to get into it now because prices are exorbitant. But you can still buy foodstuffs and guns and make communities of like-minded people in times where there might be oppression or repression. And this is kind of like just a fair, neutral point to everyone out there. You know, it's not exactly a hard right message or hard left message. I'm just saying it would be wise to formulate groups of like-minded people, train with your firearms, know how your firearms work, how they maintain. And if that's the one thing I can correlate between the nonfiction of our world and the fiction of the Death Stalker series, is that we live in a political world and we don't really have power. And one thing that is parroted between the two universes, our own and Death Stalker, is that it begins with the suppression and taking of guns and self-defense and self-governance. That's where it starts. And then it spreads out into other things. Like our current government now, yeah, gun ownership is legal. But how long is it before they're going to try, like they have in decade after decade, to try and seize our self-governance and our self-defense? And I think that may not be the intentional message of the Death Stalker series. Maybe I'm reading too much into that. But to wrap this stupid rant up, is at the end of the day, what matters is your own power within money, gold, silver, foodstuffs, and guns, and communities, and like-minded people. And you can't trust politicians, and you know, technically to be true, you can't even trust your neighbors, and even families sometimes will stab you in the back. But yeah, it's crazy situation, and how I came across the Death Stalker books. It's weird. I have times in my life where I'm just shopping for books, and for whatever reason, I just come across books that help me like cope and understand things. The Jonathan Mayberry books with Joe Ledger, like, helped me realize some things about my stuff and, you know, growing up. And same thing with this Death Stalker series. So again, glowing review. This is supposed to be for Death Stalker. It's an interesting, fascinating sci-fi fantasy universe. It's interesting as hell. There's cool characters. So, with my own personal opinion, it's all about this and the Bible, and then everything else is just theater. Theater to get you to vote for a politician that doesn't give a shit about you, nor will do anything for you. And when they're elected, they're just going to come up with excuses and not do anything. That's a general thing. So, generally, family, friends, be nice to others, and that's really about the best you can do. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Leave a like. Share your own thoughts in below. Do you think we haven't changed since the medieval era? I mean, technically, I think that's a pretty spot-on observation on my part. But who knows? Maybe I'm just a pessimistic, pragmatic asshole, which could be too. But yeah,